Hi folks, this is video 168 and the title is 8 Fun Years of Coaching Baseball. Since I live alone with my old lab Jake, I have a lot of thinking time. It has occurred to me that I have not related any baseball stories. I checked and I haven't. Well, I guess this will be a story covering the 8 years I coached baseball. But first, a little of my sordid personal baseball learnings and history. We had no Little League farm team like Squidgets in Tunkhannock. That level kind of sorted out the better kids for drafting the Little League, as I recall. It has been a long time. Nope, Cleveland had just one team that fielded 12 boys. I never missed a practice, even though I had to ride my bike 2 miles to get there most of the time, because Dad was working. We had a kid on our team named Ron Turley. Perhaps that sounds familiar to you old-timers of my vintage. He was named after his uncle, Ron Turley, a pitcher for the New York Yankees. Ron pitched in rotation with Whitey Ford and others whose names have escaped me now. Catchers were Elston Howard and Yogi Berra. Roger Maris and Mickey Mantle were also part of that team. When I was 12, our sponsor, Jerry's Bar, paid for a bus trip to the original Yankee Stadium to see them play. We had decent seats on the third base side. I got to see Mantle and Maris bat back-to-back. They hit back-to-back home runs to the right center upper deck and almost hit the same seat. I don't recall who they played. It doesn't matter. They were the Yankees, and our Little League uniforms were pinstriped too, with navy blue caps. Uncle Ron came to our practices 3 or 4 times, as I recall. I soaked up every word he said and memorized it and everything he showed us about making plays. I never forgot any of it. All that knowledge, along with what Grandpa Parrott taught me, came in handy when Brian and Dennis were playing age. My grandpa pitched for the original Scranton Miners semi-pro team after World War I. They were the forerunners to today's local farm teams 100 years ago. Boy, do I feel old. Jake is on the porch barking at the 40-mile-an-hour wind that kicked up. One thing I learned, even in my little hometown, that it can be more important who you know than what you know or can do. I never missed a practice and could bounce the ball off the school 100 yards away. That didn't matter. I was a chubby kid. I got to catch 2 innings and play the outfield 1 inning. I never did get to bat. That was the amount of my 4-year Little League career. The following year, our teener team was started with similar coaching. I did get to bat in that game. I hit a little tinker that landed not far from the plate, similar to a first base side bunt. I took off for first, but the catcher slammed into me and caused me to step on the ball. Instead of catcher interference, I was called out. I wasn't allowed on the field the whole game. It was more of the same for me. The township supervisor's kid played every inning. The local insurance guy's kid played too, etc., etc. At the end of the game, I took off my red team shirt. I walked up to the coach and told him to stuff it up his ass. I did that in front of my dad. I apologized to him on the way to the car. He told me not to worry about it. I wonder what took me so long. It's spring and raining with a lot of wind for now. It's nice to see the sun on occasion too. This winter has been long with all the COVID-19 restrictions we've had to contend with. It is 2:37 a.m., March 29th, 2021. I've always been a night person. It's quiet. No phone, no traffic. Just the heater or the fridge or the water pump coming on periodically. Well, back to baseball. I don't recall very much about Little League and before. It was fun to help get the kids in some kind of shape, and build their confidence. Teener League was where I had the most fun. The big part was getting the boys to transition from the Little League field to a full-size Major League field. Most of the boys had played ball 4 or 5 years. Now the rules changed. In Little League, a runner could not steal a base until the pitched ball crossed home plate. I always thought that was a dumb rule. Next thing I have learned in life, yes, you need to follow the rules. But you also should read and study the rules to find out what they don't say. I used that learning extensively in teener ball. The first 2 games of the first year with teens, I had a heck of a time getting the players, especially the batters, to look at me for signals from the third base coach box. The evening after the second game, I got out the rule book and read the section on giving signs to players. It said, the coach can flash signs to his players between plays from the coach's box on first or third. Well, there was no definition of what a sign was. Oh, I had a big stack of safety zone signs in the closet. I always carried some with me when doing game commission work. I elected to use 4 of those. They were printed on the front, but the back was pure white. Using a large marker, I made a big black S on the back of one, a big black T, B, and HR on the others. The next game was fun. Whenever we faced a new team for the first time, I of course had my best hitter bat first. The kids on the field were always nervous. I took advantage of that. I would have my first batter bunt the first pitch. We got away with it most of the time. Now, for flashing signs. My old friend Roy Daly coached teeners with me. I went to the coach's box with my signs. Well, since I had a runner on first, I yelled to him and the batter and held up the big black S. They nodded their understanding. The fun part are signs like those. Everybody saw it, even most of the fans. A fan on our side yelled to Roy, "Roy, what's he doing?" Roy answered, "Flashing signs." It was great. We got away with everything I showed. But the kicker was the following. We had a runner on first and a pretty good batter at the plate. All the kids now knew to look to me for a sign. For the first time, I held up HR for hit and run. The opposing shortstop turned around to the outfield and yelled, "Back up! He's going to hit a home run!" Everybody had a good laugh or chuckle about that. Next game and every one after, we used conventional baseball signing. The boys learned fast. Part of getting the boys acclimated to the full-size field, I used special drills. Time drills mostly. I had them line up and count off by 2s. Ones would line up on the home to first base line and 2s on the second to third base line. I would give them a ball and time them throwing it back and forth until the ball made it to the glove of the last man in line. The rule was no rainbows. The longer the ball's in the air, the closer the runner gets to the base. After each rotation, I had to step forward 1 or 2 steps to close the gap. I would time them again. When they got fairly close, the gloves came off and the drill was done barehanded, flips only. These were our warm-up drills. We worked on proper pitcher footwork and runners paying attention to the pitcher's feet when the steal sign was on. Sliding away from the ball was also part of stealing. They were timed on base running, both as individuals and doubles, to create some competition. My first batting practice was a disaster. Some of the boys had been with me all through. Some had been on other Little League teams. Batting practice went in a rotation of 5 hits and a bunt. Well, Doug, who was on one of the other teams, got his 5 hits. Now it was time for his bunt. I was pitching. They had already been coached not to come around until the pitcher had positioned his feet for a dedicated throw to home and wait for his delivery to start. Doug did that perfectly, except when he came around, he straddled home plate, and I was in the middle delivery and could not stop. I drilled him right in the chest. I'll never forget it. I then asked the group if any of them had never been taught how to bunt. To my amazement, 3 or 4 hands came up. The next couple of practices, we did our drills and focused on proper bunting. While working on how to shift their stances in the batter's box to bunt towards first or third, I taught them to do that to help pull or push a ball to the side of the field that would give the best chance to get on base or advance a runner. They learned very well. Brian and Dennis are 18 months apart, so Dennis came up later. They could both play all positions equally. Both pitched very well. To get the boys' upper strength build up to play the big field, the third week of practice we started with 5 push-ups for committing an error. The next week went to 10 push-ups and stayed for the season. I had a first baseman named Steve. Good player. One day in practice, he actually committed 4 errors in one play. I can't remember how it went. I couldn't believe it myself. Both my boys threw hard. I used to catch for them in the yard at the end of the house with no windows. If they threw faster and I could catch it, it hit the house and then me. Sometimes it just hit me. In self-defense, I spent $800 and bought a complete professional grade catcher's outfit. In Little League, Brian was throwing hard. His control wasn't real good and he hit a batter or two. By the time he got to Teener, his control was very good. I taught him how to vary his speed by how hard he gripped the ball. That way his motion never had to change. He got really good at it. I always gave them both signals from the dugout. The batter never knew if the ball was coming 90 miles an hour or 9 miles an hour. 90 miles an hour is not a stretch. The father of one of the kids in the league was a state trooper. He clocked Brian several times with a radar gun. His fastball was a consistent 90 miles an hour. Not too shabby for 13 years old. We were in a playoff game once. It was either for districts or their division. Brian would throw a fastball or two and maybe a curve. I taught them both to throw inside and outside curves. After a fastball or two, I called for a changeup. It was really a loop pitch. It came in like an underhand softball pitch. I remember his motion never changed. As soon as that blooper left his hand, the batter, expecting a fastball, would swing. The ball was only halfway to the plate. Their coach yelled, "Come on! He's not throwing hard enough to break a window." I had a Mahoopany kid named Robbie. He was my third baseman one year. It was the last inning and we were ahead by 1 run. It was a district playoff game. My guys were on the field and the bases were loaded with no outs. Their coach yelled, "You're going at the crack of the bat." No outs. That didn't make sense. A double play possibility for sure. With runners on, my guys were playing close to the bags. Well, the next pitch came and whack! It was hit really hard. The line drive right at Robbie on third. He caught the ball, stepped on third while pivoting and throwing to second. The second baseman caught it, stepped on second and threw to first. The first baseman caught it and stepped on first. My guys proceeded to run off the field. Game over. There was complete silence. Remember, the runners were told to go at the crack of the bat. The boys did exactly that, and they all got caught off the bag with that line drive being caught by Robbie. The umpire even had to hesitate. Line drive caught equals 1 out. Steps on third equals 2 outs. Throws to second, steps on second is 3 outs. throws to first, steps on first, 4 outs in less than 3 seconds. The other team was still on the field when my guys came in the dugout. What an ending to a title game. The 1984 season was a long one. Roy and I went to a baseball clinic somewhere in February. That year, the Tunkhannock All-Star team cleaned house. I was not the manager, but I was the coach. And most of the players were picked from my league team. We went to Berwick for 3 or 4 days to play for the Pennsylvania state title. There were 4 teams that made it to that level. A Philly area team, a Pittsburgh area team, and an Erie team along with us. It was a great experience all around. The players could not stay with their parents. The host league assigned them to stay with participating parents and kids of their league. A chance to make new friends. The entire town was focused on showing us a good time. They opened the city pool the first night solely for the players and coaches. They had 2 Olympic-sized pools made into a single T-shaped pool. McDonald's, Burger King, Pizza Hut, Domino's, KFC supplied the food and drinks. What a time we had. Berwick was, and probably still is, a big baseball town. Each team was assigned a practice field other than the one the series was to be played on. Our practice field was beautiful. It had the 20 to 40 style covered bleachers on 3 sides. The bleachers were showing their age, but it was pretty cool to play in an old style park. The field we practiced on was actually the nicest ball field I've ever seen. Before I go any farther with the state title events, I want to relate a couple of memorable events I thought about while taking a break. In Little League, I had a young man come in from the outfield to show me what he found. It was a 4-leaf clover. I could only sigh and congratulate him. One of the most heart-swelling events involved a very dedicated player named Jerry. Jerry put everything he had into learning the game. He only had one problem. Jerry could not run. Why, I don't know. It seemed like he could not lean into it and run on the balls of his feet. When he ran, he looked like he was stomping bugs. I really felt bad for the kid, but he was a gamer. At bat, he usually struck out or walked. But one night, he actually got a hit. Jerry hit it in the hole and stomped bugs all the way safely to first. Everyone there was local, and everybody cheered for Jerry. It was great. He was all smiles. The next batter was one of my better ones. I told him in the dugout to try to get a hit over the infield to advance Jerry to second. My idea was to set up a hit-and-run situation. Jerry's big smile of triumph turned to one of pure terror when I gave him the steal sign. He knew very well how to watch the pitcher's feet and when to break for a steal. He did it right. He broke just before the pitcher released the ball. My batter punched a hit over to shortstop, and since Jerry broke before the pitch, essentially, he stole second base. The crowd roared for Jerry. Unfortunately, my next 2 batters got out, and my runners were left on base. But it was a memorable evening for sure. I don't recall the events that transpired, but when Brian was 13, we had an opportunity to send him to Yankee training camp at Fort Pierce, Florida. Well, we called the coach, had all the questions answered. So we made it a family trip. While Brian was at camp, we took Dennis to Cypress Gardens and Disney World. I think this was 1983. Disney World was only about half of what I think it is now, but we had a good time. After our running around, we went back down to the camp. Brian didn't know we were there until later. I got permission to go into the press box where the scouts were observing the players. Brian was catching. I was talking with the scout from the Cleveland Indians. He couldn't believe Brian was only 13. As we watched, the runner on first broke to steal second. The pitcher hit the dirt as he made the pitch. Brian threw a line drive right over the pitcher exactly at the bag. Second baseman snagged it and tagged the runner. Low pitch, so Brian made the throw from his knees. The following year, we put him on a plane, and the coach picked him up at the airport. The next youngest player to him was 23. Kids were being signed at that camp for no less than $60,000 a year. Brian actually got a call-up letter to play ball for the Minnesota Twins farm team in Connecticut. He was 14. If I could have taken my retirement down, I would have gone too. But we turned it down. You imagine the goings-on of a bunch of 20-somethings on a bus going town to town and having a 14-year-old to mess with. Nope, couldn't do it. Later on, his mother called me. He got called up to play for the Texas Rangers. He turned it down. Next time I saw him, I asked about it. He said he was too short. Brian's 5'7", thereabouts. I asked him if he could still throw 100 miles an hour. Yep. Hit a ball 400 feet. Yep. Could he still run the 40 in less than 4 seconds? Yep. I told him I wish he talked with me first. I then asked if he had ever seen Pete Rose in person. He had not. I had seen Pete 5 or 6 times in Cincinnati. Pete is only 5'7" or 8. When looking at him face to face, I can see through his thinning hair. Most ball players are 6 foot or taller. They have strike zones the size of a barn door. Then along comes Pete or Brian. They both had strike zone the size of their hat. If you recall Pete's batting stance, he had no zone. Brian then told me he was kind of tired of baseball. He had been playing a long time. When at Yankee camp 4 times, he played against teams like Arizona State. He even got to play a few games as a member of the World Baseball Federation. They gave him one of their bats. The ash bat was absolutely perfect. He was right. He'd been playing a long time. His original hope was to play for the Rangers in the Astrodome. He got the opportunity, but turned it down. The decision was his. He was in his 20s now. I had to respect that. He was working at an RV factory. A couple weeks after our discussion, he was putting in a window that fit a little snug. He thumped it with the palm of his left hand, and the window broke and cut off his middle finger. It was put back on, but there was too much scarring. It was stiff and in the way. Brian had them take it off behind the knuckle, about halfway down the back of his hand. He worked and got it strong again. He only had trouble picking up small screws, etc. for a time. I sure do ramble. I almost forgot about to finish our state playoff experience in Berwick. We were playing the game that would decide which 2 teams would play the next day for the state title. We were losing 9-2. I gotta sit up a minute here. They had a really good pitcher, and our guys were having trouble. It was our last at bat coming up. I told the manager, "We've tried everything on this kid except a fake bunt." I gave the batter the sign to do just that. The game was being broadcast on statewide radio. Even the radio announcer was packing up. Well, our batter squared around to bunt, and the pitch hit the dirt about 5 feet in front of the plate. I gave the signal to do it again. This time the pitch went over the catcher's head and hit the backstop. The third pitch was wide and outside behind the batter. The catcher couldn't reach it. I had every batter do nothing but turn to bunt. This pitcher lost control every time. We walked in 7 runs and tied the game. We held him to no runs the next inning. Now it was our turn. Somehow Brian got on first and got to second. We were still doing the fake bunt bit. Brian stole third. I changed tactics. It was time to finish it. I gave the hit and run sign along with bunt. Brian already knew he was to steal home. As soon as the pitcher committed, Brian took off. He was halfway home before the ball was delivered. The batter turned the bunt, blocking the catcher's view. The pitch, of course, went wild, and Brian slid into home. My guys won the game, and we would play for the Pennsylvania State Championship the next day. Brian could not pitch the final game. We had a rainout, and he didn't get the required day of rest. The manager's son pitched. He was good for 4 innings or so, but then tired fast. We got shelled. I don't remember the score. It was the previous game that was memorable. It was a nice award ceremony for us at the high school stadium. We all got runner-up trophies. I still have mine. Lee Baumgartner was our commissioner. He was the best youth baseball person you could ever meet. At the end of the last game, while the boys were still in the dugout, I had them pass around and sign a brand new ball. Lee had a stroke long before I ever met him. He was pretty well paralyzed on one side. I had the boys present that signed ball to him. This was the first time Tunkhannock team This was the first time a Tunkhannock team ever played for a state title. A few years later, a Tunkhannock girls softball team actually won a Pennsylvania State Championship title. That accomplishment was a wonderful thing for the town and the baseball program. I sure do jump around, but I have another topic to throw in. Baseball can be expensive. That's the next topic. Now a little more discussion about baseball equipment. Back then, the mid-'80s, it seemed like every piece of professional level equipment cost $150. The second year Brian went to Yankee training camp in Florida, I bought him a new glove. I got out the linseed oil and got it softened, and it closed instantly on the ball. He was all set. When he got home, he took out his glove and put it on the table. I was in shock. Looked like he had dropped it in front of a bulldozer and it did a 90-degree turn on it. It was only 2 weeks old and $150. Brian told me he was playing third with the runner on, so he was tight to the bag. The batter hit a line drive right to him. Brian put up the glove and the ball barely slowed down. Went right through the glove. Using shoelaces and such, they got it back together, but it was certainly not pretty. Easton Manufacturing had a top-of-the-line aluminum bat that was all black. It was their best. The price? $150. I bought one, and that night we had a game at the Baumgartner Field in Tunkhannock. That was our home field. I went to the dugout, slid the plastic sleeve off the new bat, and told Brian to hit a home run. When he got up, he hit the first pitch. Our outfield fence was 312 feet. A few yards past that was a chain link fence surrounding Campo's trucking lot. It was lined with trailers on both sides. Brian did indeed hit a home run. The ball cleared the first row of trailers and landed somewhere in the middle of the lot. He cleared the bases and picked up his bat on the way in. When he handed me that brand new bat, it was in 2 pieces. He broke it in half about a third of the way up the barrel. I wanted to cry. Dennis's baseball life took a different turn. He got a scholarship to play for a small school in the Allentown area. Our coach was a volunteer from the community. They played 3 or 4 exhibition games. One was at Montage. I went to see him play. It was a tough night for batting. There was a direct wind coming in from center field. Dennis hit a dandy. I thought it was in the seats, but the wind knocked it down to it landing at the base of the center field fence. His mother called me to tell me Dennis didn't make the team. In the 4 games, he never got out, had 2 or more RBIs and no errors. How the heck could he not make the team? His coach said he was too slow. Watching Dennis run, he had a little hitch because of his hip restructure when he was 5. But no errors, RBIs, and on-base average. I just don't understand how he didn't make it. I wasn't there and had no input. Tough break, you know. Dennis has been at P&G now for 25 plus years. 15 in diapers and then transferred to the turbines. Brian has always been self-employed after the RV plant. He does decks, bathrooms, showers, and other special remodeling jobs. He fell off a ladder a month or so ago. Landed on a counter or a bench, broke 2 ribs that went through his right lung and diaphragm. They sent him home too soon, and 2 days later he was in for emergency surgery. His right lung was 3/4 full of blood. A regular chest surgeon worked on him this time. He told Brian that if he had been an hour or more getting back to the hospital, he would have drowned on his own blood. He's doing okay now. He's working, but not pushing as hard. He'll be 51 in September. Dennis just turned 49. Most of my players are in their 50s. Yikes. I'm old. Well, folks, that pretty much covers my memories and history of coaching baseball, Tunkhannock, mostly teener ball. It was a good time. It was a good time. The boys all turned out pretty well as far as I know. Only run into a few of them. They all have really good jobs. So, I hope we have a good summer and get rid of this mask business. And as always, I wish everyone all the best.